Welcome to NTD News Today, our top stories. President Donald Trump's tariffs are making waves at home and abroad. We're following the response to his sweeping change to U.S. trade policy. President Trump closing a so-called loophole that allows Chinese companies to avoid tariffs on small imports. Will this raise prices, and are there any upsides to it? A deep data dive. The U.S. is set to acquire Panama Canal assets from a Chinese company. Beijing pushes back on the deal. We break down the national security concerns and how it all impacts America's economy. It's less than 2 weeks till tax day. We have practical tips so you don't miss out on potential savings and deductions. And we examine the connection between the mind and the body, specifically how the physical pain we experience can, to some extent, be a mind over matter issue.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
The reality of President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs on all nations is setting in. A minimum 10% tariff will be levied on all imports, with some countries facing up to 50%. This move spells a major shift in U.S. trade policy and has garnered strong reactions from America's trading partners. Here's Trump explaining his rationale.
Jobs and factories will come roaring back into our country, and you see it happening already. We will supercharge our domestic industrial base. We will pry open foreign markets and break down foreign trade barriers. And ultimately, more production at home will mean stronger competition and lower prices for consumers. This will be indeed the golden age of America. It's coming back, and we're going to come back very strongly.
The president says the United States has been ripped off by other countries for decades. Kevin Hassett, director of the National Economic Council, says over 50 countries have reached out to Trump and his team to negotiate. International companies are responding to Trump's tariffs as well. Jaguar Land Rover Automotive is pausing shipments to the U.S. as it develops post-tariff plans. Automaker Stellantis, which produces cars like Jeep and Ram, is temporarily halting production at plants in Canada and Mexico. On the domestic front, Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins says the Trump administration is weighing farm subsidies. These would offset the negative impacts of tariffs on America's bread basket. Trump subsidized farmers to the tune of $23 billion during his first administration. For a comprehensive look at the impact of President Trump's tariffs, we're joined by Spencer P. Morrison, author of Reshore: How Tariffs Will Bring Our Jobs Home and Revive the American Dream, and Kim Laudati, founder and president of IT Intelligent Treatment, a medical aesthetics clinic based in New York City. Kim's business relies heavily on imported equipment and skincare products. Spencer, I want to start with you. You've said that tariffs are economic firearms. You've said that they're linked to economic independence. Explain your view here.
Well, I think it's very clear to anybody who has any common sense that political independence depends upon economic independence. We learned this lesson very early on. I mean, in the American Revolution, for example. The revolution was almost stillborn because the colonies could not produce the military equipment that they needed. They didn't have the manufacturing capability. So it was only really after the French started providing the colonial army with firearms. They provided 80,000 firearms. They provided uniforms. They provided all sorts of things, knives. Without all of that support, the revolution would have never got off the ground. And that taught America's founding fathers a very valuable lesson. Political independence depends upon economic independence. If you don't have domestic industry, you don't have a free country. And that's why Alexander Hamilton wrote this work called The Report on Manufactures. And that sort of kicked off a century and a half of America's tariff policy. The first major piece of legislation in America, actually, was the Tariff Act of 1789, which imposed tariffs on imported European goods for the purposes of allowing American industries to flourish. And throughout the 1800s, America actually had the highest average tariff rate. And that was the period where this nation industrialized and became the factory of the world. So I think what President Trump is doing is he's sort of going back to America's roots and saying, look, this country is not going to long have political independence or freedom if we're dependent on foreign goods, whether they were from Great Britain at that time or they're from China now.
Kim, I want to hear from you. You know, your company imports a significant amount of your product from other countries. How could these tariffs impact your bottom line eventually?
For anyone that's in medical aesthetics, but also in the medical community, a vast amount of our supplies that you don't even think about, like even phlebotomy supplies, your needles, everything basic. Most of it's coming from outside of this country. So when we're trying to import things like lasers, whether they're for medical or medical aesthetic use, the prices are going to go up. I mean, like Switzerland alone, 34%. These are astronomical jumps in what is already a very expensive industry from a provider standpoint. So it's going to have massive impact in, I think, a lot of ways across the medical community that our country's really not thinking about right now.
And what about on your patients? I mean, some of your patients, some of your clientele will have to go to maybe different companies, seek cheaper alternatives, but they're not always healthy, right?
Right, exactly. Whether it's your skin for, you want to age with mystery and grace and, do treatments like Somacell, or you want to do something more holistic with your skin. At the end of the day, your skin is your largest organ and it is about your health. And this past month alone, I myself, much less my staff, has diagnosed skin cancer that has been confirmed from biopsy on 3 different patients. So the more you step back and you start taking people away from something that others might think is a luxury, like their monthly skincare routine, you're actually compromising their health.
And Spencer, I think, of course, you have your reason for supporting tariffs, and and some would argue that it's well-founded. But the question is, what do supporters of tariffs say to someone like Kim and other business owners like her, who are looking at significant cost increases potentially due to these tariffs?
Yeah, I don't think anybody's denying that there are going to be sort of localized cost increases, and some industries are going to be hit harder than others. But the reality is that there's not going to be any, there's not going to be any gain without any pain, right? The economy is a complex organic system, and like most complex organic systems, whether it's a human body or the climate, small stressors often lead to robust responses, right? So what I expect we'll see is that these short-term increases in prices are going to be met by American producers picking up the slack. It's going to open up lots of opportunities for American entrepreneurs to sort of fill the gaps, right? And I think it's important to remember that a lot of the products that are currently being imported, I mean, we make those in America too, right? But it's been sort of the lower cost, the lower quality products that have been offshored for the most part, right? So we do have a latent production capacity to do that. It's just going to be sort of those higher tier producers coming out with a lower cost sort of manufactured option. So I think American producers will be able to fill in the gaps, but it's going to take some time, and that is going to hurt consumers of certain products in the short term, for sure.
So yeah, it will take some time for manufacturers to sort things out, perhaps for some of these tariff deals to be worked out. We know that over 50 countries are in talks with the Trump administration about potential tariff deals. Maybe some of them won't go into effect at all. We'll have to see. I mean, everyone's watching that very carefully. But Kim, in the long term, I mean, outside of the next few weeks or months, in the next 2 to 4 years, do you think that onshoring could have some beneficial impact to your industry or to your business specifically?
Well, for any country that can start being self-sustaining, of course, that's going to be advantageous for that country. But like I said, the bottom line is, even when it comes to our medical supplies for healthcare, take the medical aesthetic out of the picture. A lot of these supplies are not made here, and you can't throw up factories overnight, and you can't train staff, and you can't build assembly lines, and you can't get drop ship distribution, the whole 9 yards. This is not going to happen overnight. And in the meantime, it is going to compromise people's health. Again, you might say, well, listen, Kim, you specialize in medical aesthetics. But like I said, myself alone, not including my staff, have diagnosed serious skin cancer, which is very small spots, but underneath the skin, it had spread for 3 different patients. So we're actually saving lives. And anytime you're going to drive a consumer away from qualified, licensed professionals, you're going to be compromising their health. This is very alarming to me.
And Spencer, Kim brings up an important point about pharmaceuticals. We are looking at tariffs in that sector coming into place potentially in the near future. Trump has been talking about this. What kind of impact do you think that could have on healthcare in our country? And what do you think we're looking at in terms of those tariffs in the future?
Well, I think the question that we should be asking is compared to what? Compared to what? Look at the COVID response. This country couldn't manufacture syringes. It couldn't manufacture masks. We couldn't manufacture pharmaceuticals, vaccines, nothing. Everything was imported from abroad. And I think the COVID response really put a bright light on how hollowed out America's manufacturing is and what damage that has actually caused to everybody. Right? Because, we're in a situation where we can't even respond to public health crises because we don't manufacture the goods we need to respond to those crises. So, yeah, I recognize there's going to be some short-term pain. The president recognizes that. Everybody understands that. But this is a seismic shift in America's economic and trade policy. And it's very, very important that we stay the course and that this, that America becomes that we revive the ability to actually manufacture all of the products that we need. And, doing so is going to improve America's health in the long run. You think about since 1970, the consumption of red meat has declined, eggs has declined, animal fats has declined, butter's declined. And the reason for that is because, wages have stagnated and people are substituting high quality foods for lower quality foods, right? So I think tariffs are going to make America rich again, and they're going to make the American people healthy again.
Kim, these tariffs aren't exactly new information. Trump, of course, announced it on April 2nd, just a few days ago, but this is something he campaigned on. This is something he's been talking about, instituting different tariffs in different respects over the past few months since he was inaugurated. You've had some time to think about how this could impact your business and plan for it. I'm wondering, have you made any significant changes to your business plan in response to this?
Yes, absolutely. Most of my supplies actually come from your classic medical supply companies. And everyone from the suppliers to myself speaking to my patients have been working together ever since Trump started discussing these tariffs on where we would be at with price raises. A lot of the lower end tariffs are not going to affect patients because professionals such as myself are going to just absorb them. So our bottom line is going to go down while the cost of, operational costs keeps going up, but we will not reflect this onto our patients. And unfortunately, when it comes to states that have been heavily penalized, or countries, I should say, like Switzerland with 34% and India at 26%, South Korea at 25%, Japan, Vietnam at a whopping 46%. Yes, there are things we can buy here. Yes, they're a little bit more expensive, but nowhere near as high as these tariffs. So that's an argument, but it's going to take many years. It's not going to be an overnight fix. It's not going to be 2 or 3 years to start the major manufacturing of the bulk of what we need in this country to be made here. So in the meantime, unfortunately, that is going to have a massive trickle-down effect, and the consumer is going to be the one that's going to be punished for it.
So, we're in this situation where prices could be going up significantly. In all likelihood, we haven't exactly seen that yet in the major way. But the things at stake are indeed national security. Spencer P. Morrison, author of Reshore: How Tariffs Will Bring Our Jobs Home and Revive the American Dream, and Kim Lodati, founder and president of IT Intelligent Treatment. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks a lot. God bless.
Cheers. Coming up, the U.S. is set to acquire the Panama Canal assets from a Chinese company. Beijing pushes back on the deal. We break down the national security concerns and how it all impacts America's economy. Plus, President Trump closing a so-called loophole that allows Chinese companies to avoid tariffs on small imports. Will this raise prices, and are there any upsides to it? A data deep dive. That and more after the break.
Per item as of right now, and that could go up to $50 an item on June 1st. So what does that mean? Well, that means that plush dog sofa that you might want to buy on Temu that was 20 bucks, now that could be $45 or even more. So it definitely could affect consumers, and we're going to break down a little bit more about what this actually means. So that's about 9 cents a day that this is going to cost consumers, because that's just the average that Yale gave. That's what they computed this. So that's pretty much like picture a cup of coffee a month. So that's how much this impact of the de minimis rule being no longer an exemption is going to have. So, you can look at the bigger timeline on this. Well, you say, all right, so Yale says that this is going to cost, at a minimum, consumers across the United States $10 billion a year. And now the American Action Forum, that's AAF right here, that's about that's a little bit less than 10, it's $8 billion. Okay, but there's an upper bound to that, right? So that could go all the way out to $30 billion, the AAF says. It's just a pretty big impact on consumers. I mean, this could be somewhere around $80 a year for each consumer just in this one move that President Trump did. So that's basically how much you could expect these effects to have on these. Now, this includes all of the effects of the tariffs, though. So, because when you do tariffs, taxpayers may get some tariff rebates, or they may stop buying imported goods so much because they're a little bit more expensive now. But even with all that factored in, it's still $30 to $80 more per person in the United States. When you look at these, the de minimis rule is tied to what's been labeled an ongoing genocide in China against the Uyghurs. So there are people, for example, Kim Glass, she's the National Council of Textile Organizations, she says that the de minimis rule has allowed for this forced labor product to enter the United States and is also hurting American jobs in the manufacturing sector. And now, not only that, but the Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party says that, for example, Temu does not have any of those programs in place to prevent the company from violating the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. So they say that these products are just showing up your doorstep. Americans may be buying products with forced labor. So this will probably be a way to combat some of that. Now, when you look at the historical timeline, there has been a rapid rise of these de minimis eligible imports coming into the United States. Before 2015, and again, this is in millions here, so I'll just draw that scale for you so you can understand. This is about 1 billion of them coming in recent years. But remember, back in 2015, this was almost unheard of, right? So that just saw a skyrocketing rise. And what happened right around the time that this rise started? Well, Temu and Shein both had this rapid expansion in their companies. So some companies, for example, the Marketplace Pulse says that Temu has become a multi-billion-dollar e-commerce company because it has exploited this loophole, such as the de minimis rule that we've been talking about here. So we're gonna look into this further, and we see that most of the packages that come into the United States are from China, and they're specifically de minimis packages from China. So that's like over 50%
President Donald Trump has made
There's some other de minimis packages that are coming from other countries, and then about 10% of them are not de minimis. So this is a big chunk of the American products that are coming in from overseas that are coming from China through this de minimis rule. So, for example, these companies have dodged tens of millions of dollars for example, Temu has, and this is according to CNBC, by using this so-called loophole, and that's another reason why these companies were able to achieve such a rapid rise, outpacing the United States competitors at the same time. And these import duties are now going to be leveraged on those. And so, I mean, you might ask, well, what's the comparison? I mean, you have Gap, right? So we're going to look at the import duties paid in 2022. Gap, that's an American company, right? They make clothes. H&M, they're paying about $700 million in import duties in 1 year. But you say, well, that's an American company. Why would they pay import duties? Well, they may manufacture products overseas and then import them back in the United States. This process happens. Again, that's $700 million. That's a normal company, right? H&M, all right, you got $200 million. David's Bridal, it's a little bit smaller, $20 million. But Temu and Shein, zero. They're not paying any. And they're not even American companies. But they're able to use that loophole and send a lot of those small products into the United States that that go below that $800 threshold, which is why they've been able to dodge all this and flood the market with those very cheap prices.
Next, President Donald Trump has made security and economics in the Panama Canal a talking point of the early days of his administration. It's a key waterway that links the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean in Central America. Much of America's trade goes through it, but the concern is China could have leverage there as Chinese companies control port assets. The president said an American company was set to purchase those, but earlier this month, Beijing appeared to block the sale as the U.S. and China's interests clash in Panama. Here to dive into the story, we now welcome Marcos Shotgus, covering Latin America with the Epoch Times. He's also editor-in-chief of the Epoch Times Brazil. Marcos, welcome. It's good to see you. First of all, take us back. What is the whole Panama Canal tension about?
Okay, so the Panama Canal is a key waterway, as you mentioned, linking the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. And even before taking office, President Trump was already talking about how China controls many port holdings on both sides of the canal, also other sorts of infrastructure around the canal. Now, this is a national security concern because, for instance, if there was to be a conflict in the Pacific, Japan, Taiwan, we're talking about the possibility that the U.S. could have the transit of naval ships from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean blocked, or that U.S. Exports and imports could be held at the canal. So that has been a priority for the early days of the administration, as you mentioned. And it's pretty much around there that we talk about this. China also has a key strategy of controlling major waterways, global choke points, and that's where both interests from both powers clash.
Okay, so now an American company was supposed to have inked this deal to take over the ports on April 2nd. Why didn't that come through?
Okay, so that's where it gets interesting. So on March 4th, when talking to Congress, President Trump said that an American company was buying port assets in the canal, which used to belong to this Chinese company, CK Hutchinson. It's actually a private company owned by corporate tycoon Li Ka-shing. And what happened was that Beijing said that they were reviewing the purchase. So the regulators basically blocked it indefinitely. And we see that while that happened, we had over 20 articles in Chinese Communist Party linked newspapers talking about how this company was disregarding national security concerns. So the message was pretty clear. We don't want you to sell those. They are a critical strategic asset for us. And that's why it didn't go through. And that's also where it gets interesting, because now we stand to see what's going to happen. Marco Rubio was in Panama on February 1st. He raised those concerns. Now that the deal is moving through, we have news that Pete Hegseth might appear there soon as well, and the administration is really pressuring to get this through. I mean, we might see this play out also with tariffs and other forms of pressure.
Now, as you're saying, these Chinese regulators are holding back this deal, and there has been talk that the administration could use tariffs as a tool of pressure to move things along. Everybody is talking about tariffs, and it relates to almost all these different foreign issues now at this point. Trump could use tariffs that he's placed on every nation as some kind of leverage to make deals. What do we know about any potential deal he could make with Panama using the pressure or threat of tariffs?
I mean, so that's very interesting because that's where things could get creative. I mean, when we talk about the Panama Canal, it used to belong to the U.S. until 1977. President Jimmy Carter gave it away for $1 to Panama. And Trump was really frustrated about the prospect of not having as much sovereignty as the U.S. used to before 77 in the canal. We have seen President Trump threaten secondary tariffs. That means tariffs on countries that are trading with the country that has the primary tariff. Making it simple, if you have secondary tariffs over one country, then all countries trading with that one country also get tariffs. So we could see things get creative, I mean, with both China, Panama, and maybe even other countries dealing with the canal. And let's not forget, there's always the implied threat that military force could not be off the menu. Trump has refused to rule it out before, and the U.S. did have military actions in the Panama during the George H.W. Bush administration. So that's basically the gist of it, and that's what we're looking out for. I mean, tariffs are one way to do it, but we should look out for other ways he could get creative at it.
So we're talking about these superpowers, the United States, China, and then there's little Panama. What has Panama's response been to all of this?
Well, so that's also interesting because Panama's president, Jose Raul Molino, he's also a right-wing man, very conservative. Some people have even compared him to other right-wing leaders, such as Trump, in the past. So he has been very stubborn on Panama's sovereignty over the canal, but he has also backed out not renewing contracts under China's Belt and Road Initiative, obviously their global infrastructure project. So he has backed down from some Chinese initiatives, but he also has been very stubborn in saying that the canal belongs to Panama. But I think we could see him, moving further away from China while still asserting Panamanian sovereignty over the canal. We stand to see Pete Hegseth is now set to go to Panama, as we mentioned, and the threat of military force has not been ruled out of the menu, but that's basically what we're seeing from him.
All right, Marcus Chakas, editor-in-chief of Epoch Times Brazil, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome back to NTD. I'm joined in studio by Brendan Fallon, host and executive producer of NTD's Vital Signs, a health show that zooms in on important aspects of health that influence our lives. Brendan, it's nice to see you.
Great to be here, Chris. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely.
So, I'd like to talk about my latest interview that we've just published on Vital Signs. And we know chronic pain is such a big issue in America. Chronic back pain is the #1 reason that Americans are taking workers' compensation, and often the medical treatments aren't doing a lot to relieve these conditions, so it really opens the opportunity for something else to have an effect in these cases. I interviewed Dr. Howard Schubiner. He's a world expert in chronic pain and mind-body medicine for relieving pain, and he's also he's at Michigan State University. He's a clinical professor at the College of Human Medicine, and he's coming at chronic pain from this angle of mind-body, so dealing with that connection between the mind and the body and how these things influence each other. Here he's describing the basis for chronic pain management through a mind-body approach.
Could you illustrate this concept a little bit for us, that pain is created in the brain?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, this is how the brain works. This is really a revolutionary concept in thinking about medicine, because modern medicine, you go to a doctor, you have a disease, you have something that's wrong, they do tests, they find the problem. You have appendicitis, we'll take it out. You have cancer, it needs treatment. Those are structural disorders that need medical treatment. So medical treatment can be extremely effective in those cases. But there are a whole host of maladies where there's no actual structural damage in the body. And the revolutionary part about what we're doing is, and I base this on 20 years of experience in doing research on this, is that most people with chronic pain actually don't have a structural damage in the body to account for their pain. The pain is real. It's not imaginary. It's not fake. It's not their fault. They're not crazy. But it's because of how the brain works. And what you were alluding to, I'm sorry for the long introduction here to get to the answer, but what you were alluding to is that our brains literally create what we experience. We don't see with our eyes. Light comes in our eyes, but our brains create the images that we see. The same with hearing. And when you touch a hot stove, it's not your finger causing pain, it's actually the brain. And so the brain can create pain that is real in the presence of physical injury, obviously, to protect us. And it can also create pain in the absence of physical injury when there's something going on in our lives that might be particularly stressful or emotional. And that is mind-blowing when you see it on an everyday basis.
That is quite the revelation, Brendan. You know, I hear this, he's talking about how pain can actually happen in our bodies or in our minds without any actual structural damage in the body.
Yeah, and he really emphasizes that part of this treatment. The first step is really to establish that there is no structural basis to the pain. And from there, it opens the door to look at what might be happening in the mind, what kind of things might be going on in a person's life. There's different theories that are used to unlearn the pain, as Dr. Schubiner puts it. And as an interesting side note, in the course of working on this story, the back pain that had me standing up, kneeling down, sitting perched on the edge of my seat is somehow gone. And I talk
wow.
about, yeah. And so that's what can come of just thinking about these things with it in a different way.
Wow. And he also talked in your interview about a basketball player.
That's right. Denver Nuggets NBA superstar, top scorer for that team, had missed 100 games in his first 5 seasons because of his back pain, and had 3 surgeries. This next soundbite that we'll hear, Dr. Schubiner is giving some insights into how Michael Porter Jr. actually overcame his back pain.
And so Michael Porter Jr., his back pain was due to a neuroplastic condition. In other words, the pain was real, but it was generated by the danger signal in the brain. And so then the next step is, well, gee, what's causing this danger signal in the brain to be generated? You know, is it that you twisted and turned and you became so fearful of moving that you did less and less and less, and your brain just learned that pain as a learned neural circuit and it just continued kind of as a bad habit? Or was it also due to stuff going on in people's lives? And in Michael Porter Jr.'s case, he had a brother who had a lot of difficulties, so a lot of family issues that was really weighing on his mind. And that was part and parcel of the cause. So we have a variety of treatments for these neuroplastic pain conditions. And it's not only back pain, of course, it can be tension headaches, migraine headaches, irritable bowel syndrome, fibromyalgia, chronic pelvic pain, a whole variety of things. It can also be chronic fatigue, insomnia, anxiety disorders. So all these things, when they're actually caused by the brain, we can reverse them or eliminate them by lowering the danger signal in the brain. And that may be due to, and we can do that through 2 main processes. One is reversing the neural circuits in the brain by calming and soothing the danger signal. And another is the emotional types of work that you're alerting to with the expressive writing.
Yeah, what really struck me about this, I was looking through Dr. Schubiner's work, and I noted, I read this account of Michael Porter Jr., the basketballer, and he mentioned journal writing as one of the things that had helped him overcome this pain. And it seems, it's really astonishing, right? Something like sitting down and writing a journal would help someone to overcome their pain. And but when you think about it, many of us, I think, we're so caught up in all the distractions of our lives and the pressures. That process of kind of cataloging our experience and interpreting that, I think it falls by the wayside a lot of the time. So something as simple as journaling, it allows someone to kind of take note of what's happening in their lives, how that might be affecting them emotionally, because that's a very big part of this. It's the emotional things that are playing out as physical pain.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly notice, I mean, in the news industry, especially with the new Trump administration, keeping all the reporters in the world working, maybe overtime, a lot of pressure building up over the past few weeks. And actually, I had some pain in my neck and back, and a friend said, try relaxing.
Yeah, that's it. That's so true. And when you kind of step back a little bit, and if you don't have that expectation, there's something wrong with me. I must have done some damage. And that's why this focuses on eliminating the structural basis, saying there's no structural basis. If you know there isn't something structural there, it gives you that space, I think, to kind of step back and, what am I doing that might actually be causing this? What's going on in my mind that might be contributing to this?
Well, I think our audience, everyone can probably benefit from hearing this message about, taking some kind of control of the pain and anxiety in their lives. Brendan Fallon, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris.
Coming up, less than 2 weeks left until tax day. We have the best tips for you so that you don't miss out on any potential savings or deductions. That and more after the break. Welcome back. There are less than 2 weeks left until tax day, which falls on April 15th this year. Let's make sure you're prepared and you don't miss out on any potential savings or deductions. NTD's Steph Cox talks to Kimberly Washington, a certified public accountant and a tax expert at personal finance company Bankrate, to help walk us through some last-minute tax tips, including what filers should be thinking about right now, how to avoid common mistakes, and what to do if you need more time to file. Watch.
Now, for sure, mistakes when filing your taxes can have costly consequences. What are common filing mistakes people often make, and what are some strategies or tips to help people avoid those mistakes?
Right. So often that when people file their tax returns, and some common mistakes that people often make was, number one, maybe failing to put, of course, Social Security numbers correctly on a tax return. Also not providing the correct amount when it comes to taxable income that should be reported on a tax return. And last but certainly not least, but when it comes to direct deposit, not ensuring that the bank account information is correct. So what you want to do is make sure that you review your tax return before you hit submit. And even if you have someone filing that tax return for you, take the time out to review every single thing that you put on that tax return, because at the end of the day, it's ultimately your responsibility as well.
Now, taxpayers don't always take advantage of deductions that can help lower their tax bill. How can filers identify and apply for some of those deductions they might not be so aware of?
Right. So one of the things that you want to do is really look at your personal tax situation. I often say that, number one, if you are a parent, you want to determine what type of tax deductions may be available for you as it relates to your children. One deduction that I feel goes quite often overlooked is the Child and Dependent Care Credit. With this credit, you can put money aside when it comes to putting money for paying rather for babysitting expenses or nanny expenses. You want to make sure that you take advantage of that and report that on your tax return. Even if you're someone you're listening, you're a teacher, maybe you also work within a school, you can also deduct a small amount. It's about $300 on the front of the tax return for classroom supplies or whatever the case may be as it relates to out-of-pocket costs. And last but certainly not least, if you're someone that's listening and you're a worker and you don't have any kids, you want to look at other deductions that may be available to you. Number one, a saver's credit when you put money into an IRA. And the second one that you may want to look into when it comes to that is earned income credit, because a lot of people don't realize is that even without children, you're still able to qualify for this credit at modest levels of income.
Great tips there. Now, the deadline for claiming your 2021 tax refund is fast approaching. And the IRS says there is more than $1 billion in unclaimed tax refunds for 1.1 million taxpayers. April 15th is the last day to claim it. So how can people claim their 2021 tax refunds before it's too late?
Right, that's a very good point. April 15th is not only a good deadline when we think about our 2024 tax return, but also your 2021 tax return. So again, if you're someone who's listening, you have yet to file your 2021 tax return, and you expect to receive a refund, remember that is the deadline. And keep in mind, in that year, that was a very unique year because it was in the height of COVID. So you may even be entitled to additional credits, such as a recovery rebate credit, which is additional money that you can claim on your tax return. So you do want to keep that in mind. But after April 15th, that money's gone forever, and it becomes, of course, property of the U.S. government. So if you have yet to file 2021, it's time to do so.
All right, and next, more than a third of U.S. adults have experienced a financial scam or fraud in the past year, and 37% of those victims have lost money as a result. And that's according to Bankrate's financial fraud survey. So what are some common tax scams to watch out for, and how can people protect themselves?
The number one biggest scam is that, number one, you may receive an email or a text message appearing that it's from the IRS and saying, hey, listen, we need your Social Security number. We also need your direct deposit information so that we can correctly process your tax return. You do want to keep in mind that the IRS will not contact you in that way. I used to be myself a revenue agent and criminal investigator with the IRS, and that's just not a method they will use. So if you do receive these type of text messages or emails, you do want to report it to the IRS because it's definitely not from the IRS. Another big scam is that you may receive a phone call from someone pretending to be from the IRS, and they're saying, hey, if you don't make this payment right now, of course, we'll come and we will do something to you. We may arrest you on the spot. But again, that's not from the IRS. Typically, you're going to receive a letter from the mail in the mail when the IRS is reviewing your tax return. So you don't have to worry about those demanding calls. That's definitely not from the IRS.
Okay, great to know all of that. And lastly, if you cannot file your tax return by April 15th, You can request a 6-month extension.
Yes.
So what are the important dates to know when filing for an extension, and what does it mean for your payment deadline?
That's a good question, because number one, when you file an extension, it's the ability to, of course, extend the time to file, but it doesn't extend the time to pay. So April 15th, if you expect that you're going to owe, you need to make a payment on the deadline date. That's the first thing. And the second thing, when it comes to an extension, you can either file it electronically, so you know that the IRS automatically has it, or the second thing you can do, you can drop your extension in the mail. You can download the form at irs.gov. But keep in mind, it must be postmarked by April 15th. So if you're kind of scrambling right now, I say just don't wait. Just go ahead and file that extension so you can make sure that it's in on time. So that way you won't be charged any failure to file penalties if that applies to your tax situation.
All right. Thank you so much for all this information and sharing your expertise with us today. Kimberly Washington, bank rate tax expert. Good to speak with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you again. I appreciate it.
A new study from consumer financial services company Bankrate finds that buying a house in the U.S. has become much more expensive. According to the report, home buyers now need to earn nearly $117,000 a year to avoid a typical home. That's a huge jump. It's about 50% more than what was needed just 5 years ago. Rising home prices, higher mortgage rates, and other costs are making it harder for many Americans to become homeowners. NTD's Carrie Dunst breaks down the findings and what they mean for buyers with Jeff Ostrowski. He's a housing market analyst at Bankrate and the author of the new report.
Now, Jeff, I want you to tell me about average house prices and average earnings and how this has changed over the last few years.
Yeah, so the home prices have shot up. The pandemic really spurred a housing boom. So it was a combination of record low mortgage rates and then Americans suddenly moving around the country, maybe moving out of cities into different parts of the country. And so home prices have shot up significantly over the past 5 years. They went up to record highs. Everyone thought that maybe when mortgage rates shot up that might bring home prices back down. That's not what happened. So home prices still at record highs. Wages have gone up a bit. The inflation during the pandemic and the labor shortages during the pandemic forced employers' hands. So wages have gone up, but they haven't gone up as much as home prices have gone up. And that's why we're seeing this ongoing affordability squeeze, especially for first-time buyers.
Yeah, glad you brought up wages as they interrelate, obviously, to the monthly budget on what you can afford. So what are the most and least expensive states to buy a home, and how does that compare with those wages so we can get a sense of, where's the most value in the country right now?
Yeah. So in terms of most expensive places, the District of Columbia led the way, not a state, obviously, but in sort of unusual in that it's the one place we looked at that was entirely an urban area. But then Hawaii and California joined DC as the three places in the country where you need an income of more than $200,000 to qualify for a mortgage on a median-priced home. And then at the opposite end of the spectrum, in West Virginia, you need less than $70,000 of income. So there are very affordable places throughout the country, but as you alluded to, those places are frequently affordable because the job market and the local wages aren't supporting high home prices.
And now you alluded to earlier that there are different types of loans available to get you into a home rather than having to go to the rental market. What tips do you have for someone looking to move this spring or summer?
Well, I would say if you're ready to do it, if you think you're going to be in the same place for 3 to 5 years, if you're financially set, if your credit score is in good shape, then I would say go ahead and do it. There's no sign that things are going to get better in a year or 2 or 5. I get that question all the time. When are things going to get better for buyers? I don't think they are going to get better. So even though it's not a great time to buy, there's no guarantee that it's going to be a better time a year or 2 from now. So I would say if you're ready, just do it. Another factor is that inventories are loosening up a bit, so buyers should have more choices this spring selling season. Should be less pressure in terms of bidding wars and multiple offers. So that's good news for buyers, maybe not so great news for sellers. And then for first-time buyers, I would say definitely research down payment assistance programs. Those subsidies keep getting more generous as home prices go up. And these days, it's not uncommon for first-time buyers to be able to cobble together $100,000 or more in down payment assistance.
Consumers' missed debt payments in the U.S. hits its highest in nearly 5 years. And the city of Laredo, Texas is leading the pack. It has the biggest debt repayment problem in the United States. This is according to analysis by personal finance company WalletHub. The firm analyzed data in the last 3 months of 2024 from the 100 largest U.S. cities to determine the cities that have the biggest debt repayment or delinquency problem. NTD's Don Ma discusses debt delinquency in the U.S. with WalletHub analyst Chip Lupo.
Chip, good afternoon. Let's start with the basics here. Talk to us, when is someone actually considered delinquent on their debt?
Well, good to be with you, Don. Someone is considered delinquent. That occurs when you fail to make your monthly payment. Usually if one billing period lapses without a payment, that's when you're considered delinquent. Now, that's different from a missed payment, because if you miss a payment, if you're maybe 2 or 3 days late, you can still make that payment. You'll be charged a late fee maybe if the credit card charges one, but there won't be any effect to your credit score. It's just considered a late payment.
And how does being delinquent specifically impact someone's credit score, and how does it impact one's daily life?
Well, if you're delinquent on your credit card payments, that's going to cause some significant damage to your credit score, because one of the key factors that the credit bureaus look at, or when an issuer or a lender will look at when they're looking at your credit report, is your payment history. And if you have a track record of delinquent payments, that's going to seriously damage your credit score. Now, the effect that would have is that if you have a low credit score, you're going to have trouble obtaining credit, any type of loans or any type of credit accounts. And if you are able to secure credit, you're going to be penalized with a higher interest rate, or if it's a credit card, a lower credit limit.
And can you give us some tips here? What steps can consumers take, if they know they're going to miss a payment? This is to minimize the impact on the credit score.
Well, you can minimize it. There's no guarantee that it won't affect it a little bit, but you have to reach out to your lender. If you know ahead of time that if there's some sort of a life experience, a job loss, maybe losing part of your family income, reach out to the lender and just let them know, give them sort of an idea that you're going to be late with the payment, and make an arrangement on when you can make those accounts current. It's always important to reach out to the lender and let them know.
One final thing, talk to us. What's the best way to rebuild one's credit score?
Well, the best way to rebuild your credit score is to reestablish a payment history. If your credit is really bad, consider getting what's known as a secured credit card, which is a credit card that you open, but you put down a deposit to secure the account. Make all of your payments on time and stay within your credit limit. Don't push it to the edge of your credit limit.
Well, all right, Chip, thank you very much again for coming on today. It was good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you, Don. Thank you so much. Have a great day.